cramping and bloating and PMS is not normal?
It is not the design. It's not the design. I had to really decide internally that I was just going to live and not die. What was it like? It was a nightmare.
Wendi Michelle is a precision wellness specialist, a product developer, researcher, formulator, and project manager specializing in groundbreaking innovation, clinical programs, product and brand execution from concept to launch. Wendi's expertise is unrivaled, and her approach is revolutionary. She has formulated over 20 brands with over 100 innovative individual formulations across all CPG categories. Her process is based on her strong belief in innovation that honors the original design, truth in manufacturing, transparency, human optimization, and consumer advocacy. In addition to running her own nonprofit, Whole Healthy and Free, and all the projects that it covers, Wendi contributes to brands as a formulator, protocol designer, researcher, author, herbalist, educator, and clinical program developer. She's on a passionate and timeless pursuit to set new standards in the food and healthcare industries by working behind the scenes to seamlessly merge ancient wisdom with advancing science. Her current projects include contributions to the healthcare system, re-envisioning the supply chain and distribution channels in favor of the consumer, and executing a next-generation regenerative agriculture and manufacturing model. I'm not even done yet. There is no length Wendi will not go to in order to secure a healthy future for humanity and restore creation to its intended purposes. Wendi is also an incredible friend, mentor, human, and she is somebody that I go to in many circumstances, and especially when it comes to health, ingredients, really every single question I have related to health. I've sent clients to her, I've sent friends to her, I've sent family to her, and every person that has just even one conversation with her comes back and tells me that she's incredible and so knowledgeable. And I sometimes will say that she's like a walking encyclopedia for health because she just has so much knowledge and such a great, deep understanding of the human body from a microscopic cellular level to a more macro level. And it's truly unmatched and unbelievable. Wendi is somebody that I go to, as I said, for a million different things, but more specifically, somebody that I go to when I want to optimize my health and my well-being. And if it weren't for her, I truly don't think I would know half of the things that I know about health. Sometimes I'll be in a session or I'll be talking with a friend and I'll say something about the body or health, and they ask me something like, "How did you know that?" And truthfully, most of the time, I know these things because of Wendi and the knowledge that she has passed on to me. I'm incredibly grateful to know her, and I'm incredibly grateful that she has offered her time on the show with us today. So I cannot wait for you to hear what Wendi has to say. And I have a feeling this might just be part one, and we'll probably dive in deeper to other topics in the future because there is never enough time with Wendi, and there are always more questions to ask and more wisdom to be heard from her. So please enjoy Wendi Michelle on the Pursuing Excellence podcast. Wendi Michelle, welcome to the Pursuing Excellence podcast.
Thank you for having me.
No, thank you for being here. I was telling you earlier as we were just chatting and you made me a beautiful lunch. I said, when I think of pursuing excellence, I think of you. And it's because you pursue excellence in everything that you do, whether it's making me lunch or it's building a million things or it's learning. It's everything that you do with excellence. And so there's nobody better that I could think of to have as my very first guest on this podcast.
So honored.
You are the most excellent. So I would like for everybody to learn a little bit about you. And if you could start by telling them your story. But first, actually, I want to tell everybody how we met.
Yes, please.
Okay. So once upon a time, I was a student at Belmont University, and our mutual friend, Christy, who will also be a guest on the show, she had you as a guest speaker in class. And at the time, I was maybe 2 or 3, maybe 2.5 years into my health journey and my discovery of what health really is. And you came in and spoke, and honestly, I don't remember everything that you said. I just remember hearing that you're from Arizona, or you moved to Nashville from Arizona. And at one point in your life, you were plant-based for a short period of time for healing purposes. And at that time, I was completely plant-based. And so those two things sparked my interest. And there were other things which I won't ruin because they're part of your story, but there are other things that you said that I was so excited to hear. And I think after the class, I went up to you and I don't even know what I said, but I just was like, I love you. Maybe not in those words, but I felt it. I was like, I love this woman. I don't know her, but I love her and I want to get to know her. And then fast forward, I don't know how, I guess 3 years.
Yeah.
You moved to LA. And then like half a year after that, I moved to LA. And you were one of 2 people that I knew there. And you got me my first job in LA. And ever since then, you've just been the most excellent human, a mentor, a friend, a confidant, the person I go to before I'd go to any doctor. Facts. Every single question and any question that I have, you answer it, whether it's about spirituality or health or how to plant blueberries and parsley. It's everything. So that's a little bit of the story from my perspective of how we met. Did I miss anything?
No, you covered the bases.
Okay.
For sure.
Yeah, I think that's enough. Nobody needs to hear everything else.
There is a lot more.
There is a lot more. Yes. We were in the trenches together through
so many times
through different things. Okay. That's another show.
Yes, it is.
Okay.
And worthy of one.
Yes. Later on down the road. Okay. So back to you. Can you please tell the listeners how you got started in health and wellness and maybe a shortened version of the beginning all the way to how you got to where you are today?
Sure. Yes. So I started in health and wellness really young. I've always thought the body was super cool. I think there's something just incredibly magical about the human design. And I dove headfirst in that in high school, went through I was a fitness competitor, did all the nutrition. I was in supplementation. I thought I was living the healthiest life, so much so that I was teaching other people to do it. And somehow just suddenly, within the course of about 6 months, got very, very sick. Went from some stomach issues to literally not be able to stand on my own 2 legs. And that happened pretty much overnight. And also, so essentially I wasn't able to really walk because I had such terrible pain. And I had a couple mini strokes and was having seizures. So it was really wild and it was very extra. And I was going to the doctors please heal me. And that isn't really what they were there to do. It's not really what they go to school for. So I learned. But in the process of all that and really having to learn, I was getting medical textbooks from colleges, used textbooks, so I could learn about each specialty before I would talk to the doctors, because I thought, well, maybe I'm just not communicating well. That really wasn't the problem, but through the course of that, I learned so much that I didn't know as a personal trainer and as a nutritionist, and I still wasn't better. So eventually that took me to a naturopathic clinic, which I totally did not believe in. I thought they were just going to take my money and send me home as sick as I came in, and that's also not what happened. So I got humbled a lot through this process, which was fine because I knew I was on a journey to get better, because some doctors were saying I only had 6 months left to live.
My gosh.
And dying wasn't really an option for me. So anyway, I ended up being able to heal naturally using vitamins and minerals and IVs, and that's a whole story within itself. But I guess what that turned into, and through that little process or that time frame in which I was dealing with more allopathic and also more holistic medicine kind of at the same time, I realized I knew nothing in health, and I but I also realized if I knew what I did know and I was struggling, that there was a lot of people out there that would struggle.
Yeah.
And I mean, the legit story is I was like face down sobbing. And I just said to God, I have to get better, because if this is happening to me, this is happening to a lot of people. And I want to spend the rest of my life making sure that nobody else feels this level of like desperation and anxiety and depression, all the things I was feeling in that moment. I didn't want anyone else to feel like they didn't have an advocate, because I knew no one. And because I was so young, nobody in my friend circle ever talked about, what we should do. Like if one of us gets sick, here's how we'll handle it. Like you don't talk about that stuff in your 20s.
Yeah.
So, I
Definitely
mean,
not.
yeah, no. And I didn't really have anyone to go to. So I felt very alone in that whole season. And I didn't want anyone to feel alone in a season that was similar, knowing that I could branch out to so many different versions of that. Obviously not the exact same thing I went through. But then after I got healed and I was better, which I applied multiple different modalities to it. And that's, again, probably like a whole other conversation we won't spend time on. But the more I learned, the more I realized I knew nothing. And then I was like, I don't want to do health at all anymore, because I don't want to mislead anyone. And now I'm fully aware, or to a much greater extent aware of how much I did not know.
Yeah.
And I was like, I should not be talking about health at all.
Wow.
And this was, 3-ish years of nonstop, full-time plus, of just research and study about the human body and traditional Chinese medicine and allopathic medicine and, Ayurvedic, all of it. And I was like, I don't know anything.
Yeah.
So I'm never doing this again. And then that brought me to Nashville. It was a very transitional season in my life where I was better and I had this new lease on life, and I really wanted to do things with purpose, because prior to that I had been a risk manager, which was great, but not super purposeful. I guess it depends on who you ask.
Right.
But I became a Montessori school teacher, and I was like, I'm going to teach health and wellness for free, because my little experience caused me to be bankrupt. And I thought health is a human right, and I think everyone should know this stuff, and it shouldn't bankrupt them. So I'm going to just teach during the day, my little, classroom of I had about 22 to 3-year-olds, which were my favorites. And then at night, I'm going to just teach everyone about health and wellness. And then little by little, that became working with a lot of touring musicians and realizing that demographic is extra challenging to help them on their journey to health and wellness, because they don't really meet any of the bullet points that are, standard, whatever is, getting to bed by a certain time, making sure that, you're eating 3 times or whatever the things are.
Yes.
And then one of them said to me, well, that's great, Wendi, but when I'm on the road, there's nothing in the grocery stores. And so I thought, well, this is not working very quickly, and most of this I wasn't really charging for, because I didn't want to do health anymore. I just wanted to give it away. But I realized that even with my best efforts and giving people great information, it kind of got blocked as soon as they went to a grocery store or a gas station or whatever they ended up in life. And so I thought, well, I'm going to have to fix the food industry, because this information is not really helping. It's not helpful sustainably for people, and it's not even realistic, because people actually have lives to live. So I had this idea to make a protein bar, and fast forward that process, basically by way of a couple other things in life, I ended up in Los Angeles thinking I was going to be there for 1 year. And,
LOL.
I had given, my dog to Kylie, and I was like, I'll be right back. And and then 8 years later, I was still there. And through the course of the time, I developed over 20 different brands. I was in pretty much every factory across every category of the grocery store. So if you think of all the different aisles of the grocery store, that's considered a category. And so I was formulating products for every single category, and really got a front row seat to what is the food industry, and at a larger level, what is CPG, which is consumer packaged goods. So anything that didn't grow out of your backyard and that you buy is a consumer packaged good. And I learned even more that I didn't know before, which is there's a lot to work on.
Yes.
And so I spent a good amount of time doing that. And then while I was in the process of scaling some of these brands and developing them, I was fortunate enough to get to help open a facility in West Hollywood, which was a clinic. And they had IV therapy and a lot of things that helped me heal. And so that was really sweet to me because I was able to actually put together on the back end what ultimately helped me get better. So I was doing a lot while I was there. And then that has really just grown and expanded even since then as far as what I still do and I'm able to continue doing. So yeah, it all kind of started with, you know, this like ache in my heart for humanity, and also the realization and being confronted over and over again with these like half truths that we're told in the pursuit of health and wellness, and also how marketing and the side of product development where they're looking at like buzzwords and how do we get this to leave the shelf and get into people's carts. Like it's not always about people's health. And a lot of those things I didn't know just as a nutritionist, and I wouldn't have known until I had actually been in boardrooms. And so now I feel like I have a much more well-rounded perspective that is of service to people, because it's not just about, you know, macros, it's not about calories, and it's not that those things don't matter, but there's a much deeper conversation to be having, and my ability to actually see things at a much more microscopic level, literally and potentially metaphorically, has changed drastically since the first conversation, or the first time you ever heard me speak. I feel like my whole world has expanded like to infinity. I mean, there's not even a measurement for it. So that's how I got into it. And it's a very, you know, high overview of what I still do.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I recommend you to everybody that comes to me with a question about their health or their well-being, or their friends' health or well-being. I'm always like, go to Wendi. Because if anybody can find an answer, maybe if you don't know it right off the top of your head, which is rare, but if you don't, you'll find it, and you'll find the right answer. And it's almost like you're a walking encyclopedia for true health, because a lot of people on the internet claim to be health gurus and experts. And oftentimes we believe that our PCP is the expert in all the things, and they might be an expert in certain things, but it's a little different. Trying to be, you know, diplomatic here.
Yes.
But I'm curious to know, just from a like career standpoint, maybe back up a little bit and tell me what drew you to fitness in the beginning. Let's start there. What drew you to fitness in the beginning? Health and wellness. Why? As a young 20-something-year-old or teenager, like what teenager
I know
is interested in that?
Yeah. I was a weird child, so
I don't believe that.
No, I was. Since very young, I've looked at the world with a side eye. Some of my first memory was like, you know, I don't know. I feel like super blessed. Although I'm sure that was not my parents' favorite. But for me to always have that vantage point, and it wasn't pessimistic, and it wasn't even like a negative vantage point. It was just something about that doesn't feel right. I don't really believe that. But so I was a dancer, I was a cheerleader, so like active all the time anyway. I just always had a high level of energy, and I channeled it really well.
Okay.
I love music. Music to me is like my first language, and English is my second language. So anything that had music involved, I was like first in line for that. And then at some point I started lifting weights. I don't even exactly know how I got to the gym. It might have been like a family thing or something.
Okay.
But I started lifting weights, and I saw, well, the first thing was I love being strong. There is something from like a mental and emotional standpoint that just gets me super fired up when, and it could be just like those little neurons connecting at those formative years of I can do more than I thought. And that translated in the gym, and I was catching that revelation in that moment. I didn't have words for it at the time, but as I look back, I think that was it. It's like the things you just don't think you can do. You were in the gym. I was getting evidence of there's something in me that I haven't yet found, and that just translated from there on. So I think I had a little bit I wouldn't call it an addiction because it wasn't like I have to go to the gym or I'm going to, be in terrible shape. It actually was never even superficial. It really was whatever that thing is where I just I challenged myself, and then I would rise to the occasion, and then I'd go the next day and I would challenge myself and I'd rise again. And I just kept seeing this pattern of there's still stuff in there that is surprising me. And that's really fun.
Yeah.
So I think that was the main thing that got me into fitness was feeling strong.
Yeah.
And also realizing there's stuff in here that I haven't met yet. And I'm curious. I'm just genuinely curious about what else might be there. And it's a great place to explore that.
And that has definitely not left your mind, because every time I talk to you, you're telling me about some, I don't even know what, that I've never heard of. And then I hear about it in the mainstream media, not media, but well, I guess like podcasts and stuff. I guess that's mainstream now.
Yeah.
But I'll hear about some of the things that you told me 7 years ago, and people are like, have you heard of colostrum? And I'm like, Wendi taught me about colostrum literally 7 years ago. It is old news, but it's not to the majority of people, but to you, it is. So that curiosity has just stuck with you.
Yeah, I can't help it.
Ever since. I believe that. I actually believe that. Okay, so you were a risk manager for, was it an insurance company, right? Okay.
Yeah.
And then you made the transition into teaching Montessori and then formulating, and also then balancing formulating products, which these are just a few behind us, formulating products, and then doing precision wellness and helping people not only heal, but optimize. So, okay. How did you get into formulating? I mean, you kind of talked about it, but did you always love to cook? Like, how do you create something from nothing? How did that start?
I actually don't love to cook, which is a funny thing that...
Hold on a second.
that I don't usually... I don't even usually get asked that question, so that's fun. So I
need to pick up my job because I honestly didn't know that.
I don't, because it's just the complaining, which it doesn't. I mean, I don't even know that's a complaint, but it's not like my love is play. Like I love
that.
To play,
I did know,
but I'm really interested in biochemistry, and nutrition plays a role, obviously, in biochemistry and optimization and all those things. But through my healing process, one, as a fitness competitor, obviously nutrition plays a massive role in accomplishing that goal. So food to me was really more of a tool than it was anything else. And then as I was healing, I was doing raw food, which is really difficult. It's like, oh, just get some strawberries and, some sweet potato, but just don't cook it. Like I was making hamburgers, like quote unquote hamburgers out of raw stuff. And they were tasting really, really good. And so a lot of that was just, I wanted to enjoy my food, but I also really wanted to keep feeling as good as I felt. So I had to figure it out. So I got really good at flavor profiling through that phase of my healing. Because if you can make raw, uncooked, pretty much there was no processing going on. If that can taste
probably
good,
no salt and
very little. It was very specific types of salt, but I just learned how to do that. And I know that played a massive role in the formulation process.
Yeah.
But in the healing time of my life, I was making a bunch of recipes for myself. And I was going through different phases of types of nutrition. So raw foods, but also vegetarian, vegan. I was doing kind of all of them in a very strategic phase, like phase 1 to 2 to 3 and so on. As I was watching my body heal. And so all those recipes were things I was sharing with people when I was doing free seminars. And by word of mouth and some people that heard me speak, it turned into a cookbook, which it was never on my radar to make a cookbook. And I didn't even have these recipes written down. They were just in my head. So I had to move them from my head onto paper, which I would say is kind of the beginning of what would be called the formulation. And at that same time, I had come up with a supplement brand for touring musicians. to help them stay healthy on the road, so they could come back from that crazy life and more seamlessly merge back into family life or whatever they were coming home to. And so I had been formulating, but I don't even know that was formulating, because it was really single ingredient capsules. It was just more of the synergistic element of these, single ingredients that made what was that product. So anyway,
formulating a stack, basically.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So when I started making the protein bars, I was just making a recipe. I didn't know there was a formulator job. And most people don't know that even still. They don't know what I do, or when I say this is what I do, they're like, oh, I didn't even think about that. All the food on the store it's somebody's recipe. So now I was making recipes in my mind, and I was still, even when I was formulating the first protein bars, which were at the time, they were called Go Be Happy. It wasn't a brand name. It was just the different names of the bars. The formulation was half a cup, tablespoon. Like, I wasn't weighing things out like scientifically the way a formulator does. A food scientist is probably the term that more people are familiar with. So it was an accident. It's my long way of getting to it was an accident. And I just have always looked at it as an adventure versus I'm cooking something.
Got it.
And I only have ever done innovation. So it's not, if somebody were to come to be like, can you do a cookie? I would need to know that there's some level of differentiating factor, that there's not a cookie like this, or I'm not even interested, because now I'm cooking.
Got it.
And I'm like, yes, there's a million people that will make you some cookies.
Yeah.
But if you want a cookie that has like enough nutrients, macro and micronutrients, to substitute your breakfast, so you can have a cookie for breakfast and taste good and not have cane sugar in it and not have seed oils, I'm your gal. So it's never felt like cooking to me. It's always felt like a science project. So so that's why I do it, but not because I love cooking.
Okay. That makes perfect sense. That makes perfect sense. And that adventure is kind of like play, when you get to figure out how to make that one cookie. Okay.
Yes.
It's all making sense now. Okay. So you went from being relatively healthy, or what you thought was healthy, to being so sick you couldn't walk, you were having strokes and seizures, to now being very healthy again. Healthier, probably.
Absolutely.
Not probably, for sure.
Definitely, yeah.
Okay. Can you walk me through the process of what it was like when you were having mini strokes and maybe full strokes? You were on all kinds of medicines. You've told me the list before, but honestly, I can't even count that high. So I'm not going to try to repeat them, but you had all these medicines. You were not able to walk. These doctors weren't healing you. What was that like to go through that as a 27-year-old and then get to a place of healing? So, okay, first let's just go to, what was the process like? And then did they ever find out what was wrong with you? And was the diagnosis then the thing that helped you to pinpoint how to heal, or did you heal and then figure out what it was?
I love that question. So we'll start with, what was it like? It was a nightmare, an actual nightmare.
I can imagine.
Living out the worst nightmare of all. Because it wasn't just that I was used to running 5 miles a day and now I couldn't. And that's actually what brought me a lot of joy. A lot of my identity was in the activity, and that had been taken. So I had a lot of anger. I would see people running and I wanted to throw rocks at them, and not my proudest moments, but it's a very honest one.
Yeah.
I was really angry and I didn't feel like anyone was helping me, and I was at my worst, and I was still having to like fight for myself. And having to fight for yourself in any situation and feeling like you're like a lone voice, in the darkness, is already a lot. But when you're sick and you're having to fight for that's when, in my opinion, people shouldn't be having to fight for themselves.
Yeah, I agree.
I see the purpose in it. I understand better now that it went perfectly. The way that it went was perfect. But I felt very alone and very exhausted and very scared. And the doctor said I was depressed, and I was like, maybe, but also, I'm 27 and I can't walk. So how would you feel about yourself in that moment? So, So anyway, it was a nightmare, and they didn't ever know what was wrong with me. And I feel like that was also perfect, because while they threw a bunch of medication at me on the natural side, they just said to me, we aren't sure, but your body knows what to do. Your body has been designed to heal itself. So we're just going to arm up your body and give your body the tools it needs to do what it was designed to do, which sounded so foreign to me. And I thought, that's crazy, but it's exactly what it did. And so with just nutrients and stuff that you'd think would just be standard, my body started to heal itself, and I felt better, and then I didn't care. And I spent a solid year or two just asking God, what is this? Like, and I was researching to find the culprit for a very long time. And I feel like it was such a gift that I didn't know what the culprit was, because I never identified with a disease.
That's so good.
My identity was still intact as far as who I am as Wendi.
Mm-hmm.
And that thing became like almost an external experience that I was feeling. You know, everything was very real, but I didn't ever get a disease, a diagnosis to which I like linked arms with that. And I was like, well, this is my blank. So now we're going to do life together. I mean, which also is still very brave and courageous, but I never could link arms with anything. And then about a year after I started healing, and I would say pretty much fully better, still like little things, I'd have these random flares, you know, that was very much it was like an autoimmune or like an immune system response, because typically you're just chronically the same. You don't really have highs and lows necessarily to the extent that I was. So we went back in and we looked at a few things that hadn't been looked at. One of the things that had been looked at but didn't come back as anything. And they did find I had what would be considered late stage Lyme disease, which had reached late stages neurological. Mm-hmm. So there's 3 different phases essentially of Lyme disease. And once it gets to the 3rd phase, it's in your brain. And so that's why the not be able to walk, that's why the mini stroke, that's why the seizures and all those things. And at that point in time, I honestly didn't care anymore, because I was better.
Yeah.
I was like, interesting. All right. So like, what else do we need to do? So it gave me some additional tools as far as healing was concerned, but I honestly was better. So I didn't really care what I had anymore.
Yeah.
I mean, of course it's been very helpful for what I do now, because a lot of people who have Lyme disease don't have any help, because what's out there for that particular condition is not super helpful. So it's been of service to other people. Mm-hmm. Like it definitely, I feel like in a lot of ways it wasn't even for me. It was for the other people that I've been able to help and work with since then. But yeah, it wasn't, it definitely didn't help my healing. Any type of diagnostic wasn't there for me I had to really decide internally that I was just going to live and not die.
Yeah.
And I didn't even have like an enemy, which is wild. So did I answer all the questions?
Yeah, I think you did.
Okay.
And honestly, I might have forgotten some of my questions anyway. So that was perfect. Okay. So you're healing. You've met this doctor who said to you, your body knows what to do. We just need to give it the right things. Mm-hmm. That's so foreign to you. Why is that so foreign to you? You're reading these medical textbooks. Is that not what they say?
No.
So why would you, if you're going to the experts, why would you go to the naturopathic doctor? Mm-hmm. Were you just so desperate?
Yeah, I was dying. And the medical specialist that I was seeing, and I was waiting for months to see like the top, mm-hmm. and I was in Arizona at the time. Their answers were, we don't know why this is happening, but we have this drug for it. And so their answer wasn't what I, in my mind, thought the health system did. It was not, oh, we know that this is off, so here's how we put it back together. Uh-huh. Or let's stop your body from doing that so that you feel better. Mm-hmm. But it was more, we don't actually know why, which is fine. I prefer scientists to say we don't know, mm-hmm. because science is constantly changing. Always. Literally, by the time this podcast goes out, if I say anything scientific, it's very likely it will change by the time, in a couple of days. Yeah. So it was fine that they didn't know, but the remedy wasn't, we know that this organ facilitates that, or we know that your immune system does this, so let's get in there and support your immune system. It's kind of attacking your body, so why don't we put in some immunomodulators so we can bring down the attack. Prednisone was the answer for that, and prednisone is really just a hormone. It's a steroid hormone that kind of just stops it, but it doesn't necessarily teach the immune system to how to go back on track necessarily. So it's a very high level explanation of that. Super simplified, but essentially I went naturopathic because I was dying, and my dad heard this doctor on a radio show, and he's like, there's this clinic in Scottsdale, maybe we should try that. And I was like, that's just crap, but what do I have to lose at this point? And everyone in that clinic had been in a similar state, and by the time they made it there, they were just kind of like, I might as well try. So that's why I went that way, is because I honestly didn't believe them even when I met with them, because insurance doesn't cover that stuff. So it was a big bill that they were proposing, this plan that was tens of thousands of dollars, and I was like, I don't even believe in what you do, so I'm definitely not gonna pay money for it. So but I basically said to them, tell me one thing that will convince me that you're not just here taking advantage of people who are in desperate situations, because that's kind of what I thought they were doing. And they said, oh yeah, well, we have this neuropeptide shot. And they gave me a neuropeptide shot, and literally caused my body to immediately come out of the pain it had been in for years. And I mean, it blew my mind. It still blows my mind as I think about it. And enough to where I apologized and went back and then finished up treatment. So that's why I went that route. It really wasn't wisdom, or it was just divine intervention that I ended up there.
100%. All right, you go to this naturopathic doctor, you're healing, you're using all these things that you're learning, thinking, I'm going to help people, and / I actually don't want to do this, but I do want to do this
for free.
Right. Okay. For free. What is the difference between healing and optimizing? I feel like you're the expert in this. You help people optimize, but you also help people heal. What is the difference?
Yeah, I actually really love to help people optimize. I mean, the healing part is fun, but they heal. So, and it depends on obviously the situation, but I just feel very honored. I would phrase it more, I get to watch people heal. Like, I almost, like, in those moments or in those situations, I get a front row seat to what our bodies are designed to do. And it really is just, I facilitate giving them the tools that they need for their body to do what it was designed to do. Optimization is fun for me on a different level, because it is on a larger scale and with other people. That same thing I used to feel when I was in the gym as a kid, which is, there's more in here. Like, what if I try this? And so optimization is more or less pushing on the boundaries of humanity and what we actually can accomplish when we move a bunch of stuff out of the way, and helping people identify what's actually in the way, because there's a lot of things that people don't realize are obstacles that are preventing them from actually experiencing the next level of their potential. So there's this potential that everyone has that is woven into who they are, literally. And when we start to move things out of the way, and this is where like epigenetics is more of the conversation to have, we start to see like the environmental contribution of things can be obstacles. Obviously diet can be obstacles, emotions, big obstacles. And once there's an awareness around that, people catch those revelations, and then it's no longer an obstacle. And then they meet this version of themselves that is something they would have never imagined. But then it creates in them this hunger for what else is in there. And then the things that at one point in time they said they would never give up. I have to have, I'm going to say Diet Coke, and that's probably like, I don't know. Some people are really hardcore about their Diet Coke.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a personal. I just the first thing that came to mind. They say they don't want that, but as soon as they realize that they feel 10x without it, it's not even a thing that they ever. It's no sacrifice. There's no sacrifice there.
Yeah.
Because they're like, oh, that was just in my way, and like we just moved it out of the way, and now I'm on another level, and I'm operating differently. I feel differently. I mean, people constantly will say things to me like the colors are different, like the tree colors. I don't remember them being so green. And it seems like a small thing, but if you take that micro and you expand that out to the macro, you can quickly see how significantly their body has changed.
Yeah.
And they're just learning how to walk in the fullness of who they were created to be and the power of like their humanity.
Yeah.
Which is very exciting. So I think optimization is more pushing on the boundaries of potential, defying limitations that who knows how they got there or who put them there. Doesn't even matter. And then healing is obviously just undoing what has already manifested itself into some kind of condition or disease that they think is their life sentence. So that's the difference.
Yeah. Well, I vividly remember as you were talking, I was thinking of this memory. I'm a freshman in college. It was maybe just a month or so after I met you, and I was having some gnarly stomach issues, gut issues, I'll say, not necessarily stomach, not that organ, but I was having some gnarly gut issues, and I emailed you and I was like, I'm thinking of cutting out gluten from my diet. I've heard that it could be helpful. This is like, what year is it? This is like 10 years ago, maybe 11 years. It was 11 years ago. I'm like, should I do it? You're like, yes. And I told you why. I was like, this is why I'm thinking it. Should I do it? Yes. And then no joke, like 2 or 3 weeks later, I email you again. I'm like, I really think this is helping. Is it all in my head? And you're like, 1,000%. It's not in your head. This is how your body was designed to process foods and to be. And I just remember being like, this one little change changed so much for me, because not only did that affect my digestion of eating that gluten, but it affected how I felt on a daily basis, physically and emotionally. I would get bloated. I would look and feel like I was pregnant, and I was like a 19-year-old, like really skinny little girl. And then all of a sudden I had this distended belly, and it just looked odd. And I no longer had that. And it not only changed, like I said, the way that I felt physically, but it changed the way that I felt emotionally, because I wasn't always trying to hide my bloated belly, and I wasn't so nervous about what I looked like, which now, like, whatever, that's a conversation for another time. But that is when it clicked for me what optimization was. And you also, you talk about optimization, you talk about healing, but there's also, I think maybe in conjunction with optimization, there's this idea of prevention, or maybe it's woven into it. And because you optimize, you can prevent so many different things. And that's maybe goes into the epigenetics thing. But when you help people optimize, is prevention a thing in your mind? Are you thinking about that? Or are you just thinking, let's get the body to do the best that it possibly can, and then prevention is like the side effect of that? Is
the
that
bonus prize?
Okay. Yeah.
I typically will tell people, especially when they're struggling with weight or things like that, or they're experiencing something different in their body that is physical, that they're seeing, that what I do is all on the macro level. So even like on a quantum biology level, very, very tiny subatomical particle, like that's where I'm headed. And what they'll get as a bonus prize is their body will start to line back up. And the things that they're seeing, that will be the bonus. And then, of course, prevention, when the body is optimized, it isn't going to react and respond to the challenges of the world, the atmosphere, the environment that they're in, that really stressful week they're about to walk into. Their body is literally primed for what they're going to come up against. So prevention just becomes a byproduct.
Yeah.
of optimization. Absolutely.
Yeah. So if somebody's listening to this and they're like, I feel fine, I'm good, every once in a while I have something weird happen, but like it's whatever, what would be your pitch to them on why it's important to optimize and not just wait until you're sick to try and get healthy? In my mind, I define health not just as the absence of illness, but as vitality and energy and joy to the highest degree. So, I mean, in our world, just as humans, for some reason we do this as humans, we're good, we are chilling, and then all of a sudden a tragedy happens, then we go, oh my gosh, maybe the tragedy is in the form of a diabetes diagnosis or some other medical diagnosis, or it's depression, or it's anxiety. And we wait until that happens, and then we go, oh, yeah, I think maybe I should like stop eating all the sugar and maybe go for a walk every once in a while or something.
Yeah.
What is your pitch to not wait for tragedy? Why should we optimize now? Why? What's the point?
Yeah. Well, I don't know that I have a pitch for that, because if somebody were to say that to me, I'm fine. I would actually respond not so much with a pitch, but with a question, which is, so you feel amazing all the time. Like your periods are on time. You have no cramping, no bloating. You don't PMS.
Wait, hold on. Cramping and bloating and PMS is not normal?
It is not the design. It's not the design. So those things are common. They're not, if we're looking at the design as our benchmark for normalcy, those are not normal. Those are just common, which means a lot of people are experiencing suboptimal health just by the mere fact that they're experiencing something on a monthly basis in a way that society has normalized, but is not supposed to be normal. So I would pose that question depending on obviously who I'm talking to.
Right.
And the other thing, just as a side note to that, is that we also are very aware of the level of prescription medications that are, written on a daily basis to the bulk of this society, in this country, in the US. So my mom is in her 70s and has 0 prescriptions. She's never had a prescription. Not at any point in her life has she ever been on a medication. She is normal. So as soon as you are filling something at CVS outside of like a very acute situation where it's become a daily practice, then we're suboptimal.
Yeah.
So, and that obviously runs the gamut: mental health, emotional health, physical health, right? So spiritual health, obviously, in my opinion, is to the highest degree.
Yep.
But when someone is not sure why they should bother with it, I think it's a deeper conversation to have, and it's also an opportunity for them to think through that, because if they actually do think that it's fine the way that they are, then nothing that I could pitch or nothing that I could write is going to actually help them, because they're actually not going to do it. And so it's no hard feelings. I'm literally never offended, because people are exactly where they need to be. And when they want and can believe for more, then they know where I am.
Yeah.
And if they don't actually want it, it's not my job to try to convince them. Because if I do convince them with all of my magic tricks and stuff, which I actually don't have any magic tricks.
Yeah.
But if I were to go about it the way that I think a lot of, like you mentioned, the experts on, online, they're speaking to pain points. They're nailing a pain point on a subconscious level, which is evoking an emotion, lots of times fear, and then that's turning into action. And from my vantage point, the way that I look at things is that this optimization, this next level of humanity, is so much better served when we approach it with awe and wonder and not with fear, because fear is so short-lived, and it's honestly not a healthy emotion anyway. So how am I going to heal you with an emotion that's hurting you? So if that's the path I have to go down to convince you to do a thing, now I'm doing you a disservice.
100%.
because now I've caught you in an emotional moment. You know, I've reeled you in, and now you're in an emotional state, maybe worse than you were before you heard my pitch. So it's just not my practice, and a lot of people don't understand that, but it's fine because there's lots of different ways that I get to facilitate optimization and healing through the different things that I do.
Mm-hmm.
So the one-on-ones or this podcast or the seminars or whatever it is that I'm doing, I just think that fear and guilt and shame are the first thing to detox. And that's not something that I necessarily need to pitch, because some people actually they're not aware that they're in that space.
Mm-hmm.
They're not aware that they're motivated by those three things. There's a lot of motivation there. And there's millions of influencers out there who will gladly take your money when you're in one of the states of fear, guilt, and shame. And I'm just not one of them. So I don't really have a pitch.
I think that is a perfect example of one of the ways that you pursue excellence, because you don't play those games.
No,
you just don't play those games. So when you think of pursuing excellence, what comes to mind for you? Like in the things that you do, the way that you live your life.
Well, so many things, because doing things with honor is, I suppose, could be another way of saying pursuing something with excellence.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you know the depth of what it is that you're doing, because it's an ache in your heart, it's not, you didn't do some consumer research and you saw that the supplement industry is a multi-billion-dollar industry, let me hop in on that. That might be smart business. That might be something that people do because that's what they've been taught. But for me, I feel like it's a deeper thing that every human has in them, a purpose that is directly tied to what aches in their heart about humanity or a thing. And so when you're operating from that place of more identity and purpose, the stuff that comes out of that is excellent.
Mm-hmm.
And it's something that there's not really an equation for. And it's not even really something you can teach. It really is a heart posture.
Mm-hmm.
And it's something that has to mean more than money. You can show up on time and you can, do your job based on all of the bullet points of your job description, and that could be considered excellent. Like you got an A+.
Mm-hmm.
But from my vantage point, I do believe that when we're talking about excellence as a human, it's more than the grade that we get from the people around us. It's the application of our purpose in action.
Mm-hmm.
And with the intent to steward a thing that's much bigger than us in a way that is costly, but you wake up and you want to do it again the next day.
Yeah.
Maybe you don't want to, because honestly, sometimes I actually don't want to do it, but I do it anyway. But there's something, it's just deeper, that when I think of pursuing excellence, it's about going after the thing that's bigger than me and leaving behind me a legacy of things were one way and now it's different. And that could be on a very micro level. It could just be in the conversation we're having right now, or people that are listening, that before this conversation they were one way and now something has shifted.
Yeah.
Like communicating really well, where people catch not just the words, but the intent behind them, I think that's pursuing excellence and doing everything from what is really the most important to the individual, what really appeals to their heart and their purpose. So I don't know if that makes any sense, but
it makes perfect sense to me.
That's where I think it is different than just being graded. I think a lot of people just are satisfied with being given a grade. And a lot of the things, when you're pursuing excellence to shift a thing, to make something better, then that when you leave it, it's better than when you arrived.
Mm-hmm.
which I think is pursuing excellence as well. I think that a lot of people don't understand that necessarily. There's not a lot of external approval or even understanding necessarily about what it is someone's doing, because they may not have the same vision, or they may not have the same dreams. They may not have the same ache in their heart about that. So I think it's a costly thing. You know, you're pursuing excellence when you can feel the cost of it as well, which a lot of people don't really want to.
It's uncomfy.
Endure. It is, but it's the most beautiful, wonderful experience. I mean, I don't know what else there is to do here, because as a risk manager, I made excellent money. You know, I built my first house when I was like 22. I wasn't like, I went from this, lowly state and then decided to like do this stuff for free and be a teacher. And I just, kept the same salary. I walked away from a massive salary and also massive comfort in what I thought was, it was really like a false sense of security, because really that paycheck it wasn't guaranteed to me forever. But I walked away from that to pursue excellence, because I knew in that space I wasn't living out the fullness of my potential, and that there was more meaningful conversations to be having.
Yeah.
And not to negate, obviously you want to make sure that your business is covered.
Sure.
You got to make sure that you're mitigating your risk. But for me, there's just more, and I was willing to answer the higher calling, and to believe that in my, from my vantage point, how I feel about things, I believed that God would meet me there. So, and I think in pursuit of who we are created to be is to pursue excellence, because we were created to be excellent.
Yeah.
So
you could drop the mic if you want. You were talking, as you were saying that, you were talking about how sometimes that pursuit of excellence is not, you didn't use these words, but this is how it translated in my head.
Okay.
It's not cool sometimes.
Yeah, definitely not.
Or when you're pursuing excellence in different ways, other people don't get it. And I've seen that with some of the things that you do. Sometimes people just don't get it.
Most of the time people don't get it.
I'd like to think that I get it. I get it. How do you deal with that when people around you can't seem to understand or grasp? How do you keep pursuing excellence when other people are just not on board and not on the same track? I think our younger audience probably encounters that a lot. Some, I don't want to call them kids, younger people.
Yeah.
I'm a professor, and I have a lot of students that are young 20s, late teens. And sometimes when they're doing things that are a little bit off kilter in a good way, or seem like an alternative route, parents, friends, family, social media, it's hard for them to understand it, and they can get deterred. So how do you keep pursuing in the face of those challenges or people?
Well, first of all, I want to say that generation is my favorite generation ever. I think it's really important to add that here, because I actually think it is the most powerful generation ever.
Wow.
In all of history. And unfortunately, I think society has seen, because there's a lot of questions, they have a lot of questions, which personally I love, because that's basically how I do everything.
Yes.
They're not satisfied with just the general answer that would have maybe quieted the generations before them. They're the most hopeful for actual change that I think has ever existed. And so I get very excited about this generation, because I love their attitude. And it's not an attitude, it really is more a posture that I really love and get excited about. And as far as, they definitely are, I think they're up against a lot more.
Yeah.
Which is why they're so strong. And that's not exactly what people would call them,
Yeah.
I would call them. They are intentionally the way they are because they are also coming up against so much more than the generations that preceded them. And so, one, I just want to say that it's not easy, and it's especially not easy or gonna be easy for them, but they are 100% created for it. I mean, it is all in them. If they're not sure, I will gladly show them that they're everything that they need to actually combat that and come out the other side is in them. How do I do it? How have I done it? It hasn't always been like a perfect process. I've definitely grown through it, and mostly grown personally, and that I've realized that a lot of what I said I was doing for humanity wasn't exactly true, because as soon as I realized that other people didn't like it, and then I was like, maybe I should stop, I realized who I actually was doing it for. And that's not like a super fun thing to feel.
No.
Because it really is an opportunity. Everything, other people's reactions or other people's non-reactions are all opportunities to actually, they're kind of like a mirror.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like I say often, what other people think of you is not your business.
Love that.
It's not your business. It's not my business. If somebody wants to not like me, it's okay. It's actually not my business, and it's not my job to try to manage their thoughts about me.
Mm-hmm.
And my reaction to that is the opportunity. My reaction in those moments is an opportunity to build up additional, strength for the pursuit.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like, I kind of liken it to a video game, which I don't even play video games. So I don't know why this is what always comes up.
I was curious about that.
I do not. I think I've played a video game, maybe like Super Mario Kart.
It's a good one.
Or Super Mario Brothers once or twice. And I was not very good. But I liken it to a video game where you are constantly leveling up.
Mm-hmm.
And there's always these obstacles in every level that will get in your way. And sometimes they kill you. And you have to literally start at the very, very beginning. Before you can even get to level 2, you have run level 1 probably 100 times or whatever. Maybe that's just me because I'm really bad. But the point is that those people and their opinions or non-opinions, the attention or the lack of attention, the negative comments or zero comments, whatever it is, is all like a mushroom you've got to jump on the top of. Right? And it'll score you points once you can get on top of it. And so I do think that at some point in time, I don't know exactly when, but at some point in time, I just started realizing that it's all just a bunch of mushrooms that I have to just learn how to navigate. And I don't need to be enemies. Like the mushroom in that video game is not an enemy. It's just an obstacle.
Right.
So, and when you get on it, right, like when you are able to actually nail it, you get all these extra points. And then the next thing you know, you're on level 2 and you actually get bigger.
Yes.
So that's kind of how I see it in my mind.
I love that.
These things that come at us are to equip us. It's actually to help us to prepare for the next level, in which we're going to encounter similar things, but potentially harder, but it won't feel harder because we'll have grown in the process.
Totally.
So I think that's the best way, my video game analogy.
I love that.
To encounter that. And it's hard when it's people, especially when it's parents or loved ones, because we really assume their approval. Mm-hmm. We know that we aren't going to get necessarily the world's approval, although I know a lot of people are hopeful of that. Right. So I also just want to say here that the world will not always approve. And if you build yourself up based on their approval, you will fall based on their disapproval.
100%.
So it's not a solid foundation, at all in general. But when it's the loved ones, when it's our family members that can't quite grasp it, it's a more difficult challenge. But again, it's such an opportunity to also see in other people, like they're also they're in their own process. And I experienced that with my mom a lot in my life. She and I don't see a lot the same. And, she is, and I mean, she's amazing, but she is such a rule follower. I don't think any rule applies to me. So
Yep.
I get confused
Yeah.
when I'm like, who? I never signed that paper.
Uh-huh.
How is that like how is that a rule? I don't
Yeah.
remember talking about that. So as I went through my life and came up against her as my parent, but also as an adult with her as my parent and wanting to also still be very respectful, I at some point in time just realized she's also figuring it all out.
Yes.
And so I don't need to take it personal. So what she thinks of me is not my business. But I can love her immensely through it.
Yeah.
And I can also seek wisdom about where might she be coming from and what can that teach me.
Yes.
About the other people I'm going to encounter at some point in my life that will give me the grace and the mercy and the patience to walk with people who are similar to her.
Yeah.
And learning that instead of taking everything offensively and like somehow like her reaction is about me, it's not about me.
Yeah.
Her reaction is to what I'm doing, but it's about her.
Yeah.
And once you can separate those things and you start realizing that people's response to you isn't even actually about you, it's 100% about where they're at in that moment, you get free.
Yeah. That's massive.
So massive.
And she's also not toxic because she doesn't agree with you.
Oh yeah, she's actually a gift.
Yes.
Those things are gifts.
Yes.
Every single doctor who fired me and I fired and I was, angry at, every single one of them is a gift. And not just to me, but a gift that literally kept on giving to people for, up till I take my last breath and slide into home base.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like those people that I could have been like, those are toxic doctors and they're, trying to kill me. Well, or they helped me live.
Right.
It's a perspective that we get to choose and it becomes ours that we get to own. So yeah.
That's beautiful. So beautiful. And so true.
Very
it's
true.
Just so true. Okay. So I have just a couple more questions for you.
Okay.
One thing that I've seen you do throughout, I want to say throughout your career, but I know that's not your whole career, but as I've been walking alongside you, I've noticed, and in your title, Precision Wellness Specialist, I've noticed that you don't ever give a one size fits all program, protocol, anything like that. And I even remember back in the day, we were both in LA and I was vegan at the time. And I said to you, gosh, you know what sounds so good? Salmon. And you were like, then eat it. And I was like, but I can't because I'm a vegan. And you said, do you know the health benefits of wild caught salmon? And I was like, yeah. And you said, then why don't you eat it? And I said, Wendi, because I'm a vegan. And you were like, do you have to be? And for whatever reason, that question of do you have to be got my wheels turning. It sparked something in me where I had attached myself to this identity of being vegan. And God forbid if I ate anything that didn't fall in alignment with that title, something bad was going to happen. And I don't even know what that is. And although you supported me in the way that I was eating, you also didn't support me attaching myself to this one label. And I was so curious about that because you supported me in the way that I was eating. I thought there was this only this one way to eat, to be healthy and to be optimized. And you just totally debunked that. So before my mind's going to my next question. Before I go to the next question, why do you not take a one size fits all approach? And is there ever an approach that could be one size fits most? There's so many diets and so many experts and people that talk about, and now especially carnivore and then plant-based and then paleo and then keto and all these different things. Is there not a one size fits all or a one size fits most? What do you think about that?
Well, first of all, I'm very curious how I didn't answer you when you said, I can't, Wendi, I'm vegan. I didn't say, no, you're actually Stephanie.
You probably
that's
did
my
say that.
That's my standard.
You probably
when anybody
did.
says I'm a, and then they name something other than their first name, that's my initial pushback, which is, well, actually, you're Stephanie and I know you.
You probably did.
And my approach is that way because everyone's different. I've never met another Stephanie. And all the different people that I've worked with throughout the years and people that I haven't worked with, but I know, there's just one of them. One of them with that one story, the one place they were born, the one way they were raised, the one way that they dug in the dirt or didn't dig in the dirt, the way that they see the world, or, you know, this way or that way. There's so many nuances to people that are to be celebrated. And it's one of my favorite things about humans. And I love humans. I love people like so much. And so I feel like it's degrading to try to keep putting people in the same box. And that really would say a lot more about me than it would anything else, because that would simplify things for me. And it would also show how I view people, I think, because it would show that I see everyone as exactly the same, and I don't.
Yeah.
I see everyone as such specifically unique and amazing individuals that it's impossible for me to put together any type of diet or, you know, optimization program without knowing them fully. And that's my favorite part of what I do, is getting to know people fully. I don't want to just know their symptoms. I want to know what brings them joy. I want to know what lights them up. I want to know what they're doing when they forget to look at the time. Those are the things that really matter to me, because I know somewhere in there is purpose. Somewhere in there is excellence. And if we can get there, then all the little things like the symptoms, they start to fade away. But if I only go, well, people with these symptoms, they fit in this box, you know, or they fit in this box, then I've devalued the opportunity. I've missed like a real sweet opportunity to actually call out of a person the fullness who they were created to be, and help them identify what's maybe missing, or, you know, a different an approach to optimize who they are. So there is so many different diets, and honestly, we are seasonal creatures. So I feel like for me, and that's the best example because I know me fully, and for me, raw was perfect for a season, and I love that season, and it's over. And also being vegan, and also being vegetarian, and also being I've done all the things.
Yeah.
They were at the right time, but they were never my identity. And it wasn't that I don't have, I do think that we need to be a lot better on the farming side. I think the animals need to be taken care of completely different. So it's I guess food has not ever been like a dismissal of the issues that we have as a society. And again, that's probably its own podcast, but
Definitely.
But I think that people are seasonal. And so even if there was a box, I think it would literally be more like musical chairs. So maybe I could set up a musical chairs game.
Yeah.
That everyone would probably fit into at some point. But what chair or diet or a program they've sat on would probably be different from each other. And so maybe there's like 10 that I'd put in there. And I think one that for sure would be in that musical chairs game that I think would fit most is to get back to the original design, which is what we were designed to eat. And what we were designed to eat are real. They grow in the ground, or they're animals, depending on which chair you're sitting on. And they are in the sea. And if they come out of a lab, they are dead. They're dead. So we are alive. And we, I think, thrive when we are interacting with nature. I really do believe, and this is, I asked you at the beginning if I could get mystical, like how
Please
mystical
do.
I was allowed.
Please do.
But I have this theory that at the very beginning, when we were in the garden, which is my belief, that there was a time in which we actually walked in the garden with God, and there was a oneness to us and nature and to our Creator. And I think at that time our brains were not two hemispheres. I really do believe that our brain was one hemisphere, and I'll substantiate that theory in a second.
Okay.
And that when we had to know, when our insistence on knowledge or to be like God came into play, and what the Bible believers would say is the fall of man, when we actually did the one thing. We were allowed everything, but we did the one thing that we were encouraged not to do. That's when we became right and left brained. And the reason I think this is, one, because I think that's also why we feel so disconnected from nature and why we feel so confused, is because there was this oneness where we actually were able to tap into and understand the seasons and the plants and the seeds and everything that was growing spoke the same language as our bodies. And we knew when we walked outside what herb to get for a thing, what food to eat for that season. There was just a different like one track mind, that there wasn't confusion around food. It's very strange that we have confusion around food at all, honestly, because it seems pretty simple to me.
That's a good
we
point.
got to eat, but why are we eating? If not boredom, if not because it's noon, if not because somebody told me I have to, why do we eat? And it's actually very simple. And I think that it made sense at one time, and then it stopped making sense. And then as industry has gotten involved and we've actually started to make money on the confusion, we have gone so far away from what was at one time just a knowing. And the reason I think that there was one brain is because we know with all of the recent studies on the different psychedelics, and this is old knowledge actually, but DMT is a chemical that's in the brain at the highest levels when we're born and when we die. And we also know that by looking at different scans of the brain, that when there is some kind of psychedelic involved, that the hemispheres start talking to each other.
Yeah.
So that means that at some point in time in the design, they talked to each other, because otherwise it wouldn't do that. It's not going to. Creation was full. It was whole at the beginning. So it's not something new that's just happening because we've introduced a thing that nature grows.
Yeah.
It's almost like it's revealing a thing that was intended to be. And that's not to say, and I think this is also very important, it's not to say that that's how we should operate, because obviously we're not,
right.
Because our hemispheres are split, that's our ability to actually interact in this real world, knowing about quantum physics, knowing that our brain's actually dumbing down what we're seeing as a wall is really just a bunch of vibrations. And it's right. So we have to, in order to actually live and not be feel like we're losing our minds, we have to maintain the structure of what is this realm.
Right.
So I don't recommend playing to connect those two hemispheres because it was the original design. I'm simply saying that the realm that we live in now is different than the original design, but that if we can just get back to little by little, start going back to what we were designed to eat, what's there for us, what we need, what's going to cause us to thrive, and also ask questions about what's in that soil. What did you spray on that thing? What did you feed that animal? Why is it in a cage like that? Those are the questions we should be asking, because that's as far from nature as we've gotten.
That is not the original design.
That is not the original design. And so that's, I do think, a chair that fits most is to start looking at what in your life doesn't mimic what creation intended, and without judgment or offense. And I think that's a critical lens to look at that
Absolutely.
through, because it's very easy. And again, there's been a lot of narratives that have been very helpful for industry to write as copy, around a marketing material, but that doesn't mean it's true. And to actually ask questions, which is why I think this generation is the most powerful, to ask the question and be like, how did you get that cell to grow in that petri dish so fast to make a burger? We have to ask these questions, because that's not what nature does without some kind of playing with it, and nature's not to be played with. So I think that's probably the one that would fit most. And again, not all, because there's so many nuances, and it would be beneath me to try to, plug a thing, because there's nothing to plug.
Totally.
For humanity.
Right. 100%. I had a student ask me this semester, if I want to be healthy and I want to eat healthy, where do I even start? Like, how do I know what's good and what's not? And I said, if God made it, eat it. If man made it in a lab with ingredients that God didn't make, probably don't.
It's a good starting plot. Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so. And like you said, there's so much confusion around food. But I think half the food that's in the grocery store, the consumer packaged goods, CPG,
Yep,
right?
CPG.
Half or 3/4 or maybe 95% of CPGs isn't actually food. It's chemicals and things that a food scientist made specifically to taste really good so that we would buy more of it. Like you said, it serves industry. It doesn't serve people.
Mm-hmm. It is called the Food and Drug Administration. All of it is under one administration because it's all affecting our brains like a drug. And a lot of the formulations are, and I say this not because I'm just guessing, I've seen it. A lot of the formulations are for a crunch that triggers a neural response or create, as a precursor to a neurotransmitter, some kind of reward, dopamine, or whatever it is, the flavor that is sometimes when it just says natural flavors, or even, I mean, we know artificial flavors are artificial, but natural is not that much different. They only have to put one word there. And the reason why they've allowed that is because it's actually sometimes hundreds of chemicals. And if you were to put all of the chemicals that went into making the natural flavor watermelon, you would not have room on a label to get all those words on there because it's just hundreds. So, yes, they're formulating for the purpose of marketplace.
Yeah.
I get it. I'm a business owner. Like, there's no hate here, but I also just feel like it's time to just start telling the truth about the things and just say, I'm just calling it as I am. And if you want to just be sold to, if you just want to be a consumer and not a creator, that's fine. But at least know what you're consuming.
Yes, totally. Do those natural flavors, ingredients really do that much? If it's like a watermelon flavored beverage or watermelon flavored lollipop or, whatever it is it really that bad if I'm just like drinking this once a day?
Well, it's very hard to say because they don't study it. So it's a very difficult place to speak into without applying some level of theory or opinion.
Okay.
But based on the extraction methods and the methodology of those chemicals, and then if you look at our health as a nation, and then you put that on a chart in which you start to see the introduction of synthetic fragrances, synthetic flavors, synthetics, it's a trajectory you can't ignore.
Yes, true.
And so, and the challenge is that a lot of things changed. Our agriculture changed, the spraying on the crops changed, the industrialization of food changed. So it's very difficult to be able to call out one, but it's enough of a pattern that I would say maybe that's a good experiment to try for yourself and see how much different you feel when there's not natural flavors in your foods.
Yeah.
Maybe it's something to try.
That's a good answer. It's a good answer. Okay. There are a lot of things that I know you've learned being in the food industry, helping people heal, helping people optimize. What are maybe like the top 5 myths that you would like to bust when it comes to food, consumer packaged goods, or health or well-being? What are some, let's just do 3. Okay. What are the top 3 myths you would like to bust or that you think are the most important to bust?
It's so hard because there's so many.
You can give me as many as you want.
Well, I think that it's an opportunity to highlight some that makes it really easy for people to apply to their life. So to go on a tangent might not be very helpful, but
please give me whatever you want. Tell me whatever you want.
I do think that the one that I just mentioned about eating what nature designed is going to be kind of part of one of the main ones, which is that the people in the grocery stores who like decide what can be on the shelf are actually, and I mean this across all retailers, so there's not a retailer that does this really, really well. The buyers for the products in the grocery stores are actually not advocates for your health. There is no advocacy on the retailer what are we going to put on the shelf. There's a real challenge there for brands who are trying to bring something new and innovative to the marketplace that it's not like the number one thing is what's the healthiest for people.
Yeah.
So when people shop, I think there's this presumption that somehow somebody has looked at this and approved it as healthy. And so they don't have to know anything else. And in reality, there isn't an approval that this is healthy, because even our food pyramid, I have side eyes on. And a lot of people do.
Big side eyes.
So
yeah,
that's one, is the presumption that something that says healthy on the package means healthy. And in fact, it doesn't, because there's certain parameters that allows a brand like me or other brands to put, it's called a health claim. So if you say healthy, then you have to meet certain parameters. Those parameters are not, does this help with vitality? The parameters are things like it has to have this percentage of certain vitamins. It has to have this or lower amounts of like saturated fat, or, there's certain things, but they don't tell you how to get there. So if I want to make sure that something meets those parameters, I can still use all the chemicals to do that. And I get
all the synthetics.
And I can still put healthy on my label because I hit those 5 or 6 points. But somebody like me, who when I'm in the food industry, I'm like trying to pull as much micronutrients from nature as possible and make it taste good and keep it simple and easy so people can go about their lives. But if I don't hit those points, I'm not allowed as a brand to say that this is a healthy product.
When in fact, your product
potentially the most healthy.
Is the most healthy.
Yeah, potentially. So, and it depends again on which lens you're looking through. But so I think that's a big one, is that there's a lot to fix on the labeling side. I think there is some movement towards that. We're getting better, but it's not really in favor of the consumer. It's still in favor of the big brands. And you know that there's conglomerates of brands. There's only probably 8 main food brands out there, and then they own the rest. So there's 8 big companies that are really making that a lot of this is in favor of, more so than consumers. So that's one. I think the call outs of my macronutrients, this much calories, this much fats, this much is not an indication of much. I think that people are getting smart. I think consumers are getting smarter about that, but I think it's worth mentioning that counting your calories is not really a health move necessarily. To say that calories don't play a role would be silly. Right. Obviously, we know, but calories are actually energy. It's an energetic transfer. You're actually getting energy from the food that you eat if you're eating food that will promote energy. So there's obviously a whole lot of systems. There's a lot of pathways within the metabolism, but to say I'm reducing calories means I'm lowering my energy availability, which if you word it like that, nobody wants to do that.
No.
But if I say, well, you should eat all the energy, but it's being presented to you by the marketplace as caloric, that's also not healthy.
So true.
So understanding that, like, what is all encompassing of the energy that's providing. And again, going back to nature, if it speaks the same language as our bodies, it's going to be more efficient at being bioavailable and actually working on those pathways and creating energy from it, that your body will feel sustained and you'll have clarity of mind and you'll have good sleep and you know all the things. So I think missing that, or the fact that calories have been really highlighted or fat has been really highlighted, and depending on the age of people listening to this, all generations have really encountered a diet, right? So some people are still like, don't give me the eggs, take the yolks out. Right. And some people are like, not butter, So it just depends. We've all kind of encountered it through the decades. So that's another one. And then I think the presumption that what is natural is also something to bust, because natural also is along the same lines as the word healthy, is that it doesn't actually mean, if you were to go to the etymology of it, look up the definition of natural or look up the definition of healthy, you're going to see something different than what the qualifying, the requirements are of industry to be able to say all natural. So, it's just human psychology. We see something that says healthy and all natural, and we're like, in the cart you go.
Right.
I'm trying to be healthy. I want to be all natural. Meanwhile, it's not necessarily, in fact, most of the time it's not.
It's false advertisement.
It is false advertisement. So those are my top 3 that I think are like helpful to shift the perception. And I think that is step 1, is shifting the perception of it's okay to do a little side eye. And in fact, it's how I can advocate for myself until the system provides me more advocates. And that's what I would say I am more than anything, more than a product formulator, more than a precision wellness specialist, more than a brand developer. I'm a consumer advocate. I'm only doing this. Nobody wants to be at the factory at 4:30 in the morning. Definitely not me. I usually go to bed at 2 a.m. I don't want to be up at 4:30. So there's just not a lot of that in the industry. There's not a lot of people in the factories who are advocating for the consumer. They're advocating for the brands and for there to be margin and for people to make money. And we need to make money, obviously, when we're doing the right thing.
Of course.
That's the challenge. But shifting the perception is that there is a personal responsibility that unfortunately is needed. And I don't like that. Like, I'm sorry that that's the case. That the generations that preceded the ones listening to this are having to advocate for themselves, because that is an indication that we have failed as the generations that have preceded. So on behalf of those generations, I'm sorry that it requires an advocacy, but it does. And feel like this is permission for you to ask questions.
Yeah.
And to be as bold as you need to be for your personal well-being and for your children's and your children's children. So that's probably the main ones.
Those are 3 really good ones. Really good ones. Okay. I'm just going to ask maybe one question, maybe 1 or 2 questions. What does excellent health look like to you?
Wholeness. As a society, we have been fragmented. Even in the pursuit of health, we'll take out the emotional, we'll take out the mental for now. On a physical level, and I think a lot of people struggle with this now, that if they want to improve a certain thing, they need to see this specialist and also this specialist and also this specialist. And also, so I need to get a nutritionist, I need to get a personal trainer, I need to get a massage therapist, I need a physical therapist, I need to get a gym membership. So those are all fragmented pieces. And that's just a piece of the pie, right? That's only like one piece of the wholeness of is humanity. So excellent health to me is when a person has been able to look at the fullness of who they are and approach it with a strategy that is bringing it all together instead of dropping off pieces of themselves at different specialists everywhere. And it is a strategy to get there because, again, the approach is in opposition to what the system suggests. So, I love holistic doctors because the concept is that they're going to be looking at you as a whole. And that's, maybe one place you have to go versus going to a rheumatologist and a gastroenterologist and a
cardiologist,
and all the ologists.
Yeah.
So that helps. That's kind of part of the strategy where you start to condense your needs into one to where you get that one thing whole, and then you're like, great, now I need to also look at my emotions. And so how do I get emotions and my mental health together without dropping pieces of me off here and pieces of my story here and pieces of my story here? And in the pursuit of that wholeness you achieve excellence, because you find that you are the fullness of who you were created to be.
Mm-hmm.
You're not in pieces relying on that piece of you to be healed by that person and that piece of you to be healed by that person, but that you're actually more in control.
So not outsourcing.
Not outsourcing, I'd call it partnering, because I think we need each other.
Yeah.
I think, you know, I do think that people without people is part of our problem.
Agreed.
But there's a lot of people who are experts who are not personable. And if you can go to the best, and this was my experience, I went to the best doctors, but I wasn't heard. What I had to say wasn't what they were there to listen to.
Yeah.
They were doing exactly as they were trained to do, right? This is not, like I said, I have so much love for everyone, but majority of my healing came when I was heard, and when I wasn't made to be told. I wasn't told I was crazy,
mm-hmm.
because I had questions that nobody could answer, which that's so gaslighting and projecting. But
yeah,
I mean, it's another story. So
mm-hmm.
I think being heard and choosing the partners who can actually see you and want to know the fullness of you and will encourage you on that pursuit, and not sell you on this, like, well, this is the rest of your life or whatever. Finding those partners, I think, is key to becoming whole. Mm-hmm. And becoming whole, I think, is another level of pursuing excellence, mm-hmm. specifically excellent health.
Beautiful. So what I'm hearing is healing is possible, optimization is possible, and in fact, it's what we were designed to experience.
Humans can do so much more than they realize. And so not only is it possible, it's extraordinary. It's something that is truly an adventure to go on as a human and discover and find that there's so much more that is not just worth living, but makes life like the best. It makes it the best. And mm-hmm. to know that in this limited amount of time that we have, which is truly like a blink of an eye from beginning to end in this realm, this is the only time that we will actually know what it feels like to be hugged. Because outside of, the earth suits, I like to call them, outside of those, we are spirit, and there's, we operate differently, but this is in this realm, we get to know what a baby's cry sounds like. We get to know what a hug feels like. We get to know what it is to pet a dog. These things, it sounds so silly, but realizing the richness of this experience and being able to live through that lens it makes everything possible, mm-hmm. even the impossible. I've seen too much to think anything different, and it isn't some delusion. I would say I'm as much a scientist as I have a belief in the things unseen. So I live right in the gap of those two things, and mm-hmm. I love them both. But I've seen people heal in miraculous ways. I've seen things that would have been impossible possible.
Yeah.
So I don't know anything else. So yes, healing is possible. Optimization isn't just possible, it's fun.
True.
And humans are phenoms in every way.
And you're a great example of a phenom, of a human. So I just want to thank you for the way that you've pursued excellence your whole life and the way that you continue to do that, because not only has it helped my brother heal from mold toxicity and exposure and all kinds of things, and my mom, and just seeing them become so healthy and probably the healthiest they've ever been, or maybe have been in a long, long, long time, because of your expertise and your influence, has been such a gift to me. And friends too, who have come to you and have been able to optimize and are in the process of optimizing, and just every way that you've affected my life. Just watching you pursue excellence has been a gift to me, because you serve as a role model to me, and you don't hold anything that you learn inside, you share it. And that has been truly a gift because I get to learn from you and then I get to share it. So you create this massive ripple effect that you probably don't even know how far it reaches. And I probably will never know either. But because of you, I have been able to grow and expand and learn just by watching how you do those things in the way that you pursue excellence in your businesses, with your clients, how you serve people, your faith, your spirituality, as a mom, as a friend, everything that you do. So, Wendi, thank you for A, pursuing excellence.
Thank you.
And B, for being who you are. And C, for being on the show and spending your time with me. I really appreciate it.
It's so kind. Thank you so much.
It's just the truth. I do love you. I do love you.
And I'm so excited about this show. So thanks for letting me be your first guest. It is truly an honor.
Well, thank you. All right. That's a wrap. Thanks so much.